We're both big fans of Seven Powers, Hamilton Helmer. I think probably one of the foundational books that I get everyone to read who joins 20VC. Why do you think it's really important for founders to understand Seven Powers and where their powers lie first?
So I'm a big fan of the powers framework. For those who don't know at the high level, it talks about how do you deliver value to a customer, eventually forming as like free cash flow in a way that is sustainable, superior, and significant. So something that is truly better, it's truly superior, it's significant, it matters that it's better at whatever it is that it does. It's not whatever, an ice cream truck with sort of the tallest roof, it doesn't matter. And it is sustainable, it's hard to copy. And so that's the idea of these 7 powers, which is kind of like moats, but moats are all defensive. And I love the powers beyond being more elaborate. They talk about how to sort of provide value and create a valuable business. I think the reason it's important is the worst thing that can happen, in my opinion, to a startup is not to crash and burn, but to get stuck. Is to build something that is like a little bit valuable, and you build it up to a business that is 2, 3, 5 million in ARR, not dismissing the sort of the difficulty of doing that, but then you get stuck. You grow at a 20% rate from sort of that rate, and it's too good to just walk away from, but it's sort of really not what you signed up for when you, or your investors signed up for. And I think powers really are about the ability to grow your business. You think ahead, again, you anchor in the future, and you say, what is it that I'm building that will actually allow me to build on and grow? And if you don't have power, if you're sort of building something that just has product market fit, but is actually pretty easy to copy, if you're building something that purely relies on operational excellence, then you're in a pretty risky situation, right? If any competitor comes along or like a burst of incumbent sort of operational excellence, and you might sort of lose your place, the idea of power is indeed to be that multiple. And so I don't think you should dive in and only care about power at the beginning. You need to be building value or sustaining some value you created. But if you don't think about it, then you're carrying that risk of just getting stuck.
Do you believe in defensibility at the early stages? This is something that's I'm very strong on, which is defensibility from day one is bullshit, I always think. Do you agree with that? Or do you actually think when you're looking at companies you angel invest in, highly defensible, I like this, and defensibility plays a big part of your mindset?
Well, I think at the beginning, you can't be defensible. You have nothing, So I think maybe the only exception to that is if you have very unique knowledge in the founding team, then maybe that's an exception.
I think now actually is a really unique time with kind of the new wave of AI companies, which is if you come out of 10 years of, Stanford's AI lab, that is a defensible moat of knowledge, which other people likely don't have.
Potentially, although now that has grown, so that's, so that's the cornered resource kind of power, right? And do you have some sort of very unique set of skills that nobody else can have? And are they indeed superior and indeed significant? But
have you seen Taken? Liam Neeson. There's a brilliant line. His daughter gets kidnapped, and he calls the kidnapper and he says, "I have a very unique set of skills." And it's exactly that statement. So terrifying.
So it could be. I think specifically right now in AI, the space is moving fast enough, and there are enough people that it's not really a cornered resource. It can be, a necessary and a valuable capability, but I think it's hard for that to be alone. But what I do think is critical is to think about how does this business become defensible. So say if you assume success, if you assume you found product market fit, which absolutely should be consuming you, 90+% of your attention should be on product market fit, not power at the beginning. You have to build something of value to then sustain and differentiate.
So step one, get product market fit, and then we think about 7 powers.
Correct. So I think when I invest, I think about some theories about how you could build a defensible project over here. If this was to succeed, what is it? Would you have a network? Would you be accumulating some data? Would you be aggregating, accumulating switching costs, from within the customer? Is there any sort of counterpositioning that you're doing it? Or are you doing something that incumbents, even if they see, they would choose not to adopt, like the Netflix Blockbuster example, right? Or for Snyk, it was dev first. Dev first is something that is counterposition to the security industry. Because
look at this with traditional journalism, they will never send you questions ahead of time, ever, and they choose not to. I will always do that. It's a counter-positioning example, I think.
I think so, and I don't know the industry well enough, but it's an example of that, of saying if people are already well incentivized to believe and stick to the existing system as it works, because that is what makes them powerful today, than counterpositioning against them. And so I think, per Helmer's book, the two powers that you build at inception are cornered resource and counterpositioning. And so you can come indeed with some unique knowledge or perspective, or with a counterposition that is hard. That's like the innovator's dilemma, hard for sort of the incumbent to produce. I don't think you should focus on those, but as an investor, even at the early stage, I try to theorize about what could it be. And then once you theorize that, you put that aside and you really just focus on product market fit, and you have to get something working. Once you get something working, then you start tweaking. Then it's like when you're getting to the point where you hit product market fit and now you need to sort of scale some things and things like that, then maybe you should tweak priorities. You shouldn't overhaul priorities, but you should tweak priorities for things that matter. It could be the type of legal license you give to your customers around the use of data that you have. It could be investing in some viral mechanism. It could be trying to sort of invest in stickiness, in sort of switching costs.
If we think about kind of product market fit just as the first chapter before we move to the 7 powers, I had an investor update last night, and it was a 1.4 million ARR business. It's got there over a 2.5 year period. It's kind of been a little bit slower than everyone thought. It's not growing particularly fast, but it's not doing badly, but it's taken quite a lot of cash to get there. And I just looked at it and I said, does this have product market fit? I don't know. Customers are staying, they're paying, there's enough of them. There's enough money. 1.4 million, it's not nothing, but it's not being pulled out of their hands. Yeah. Was it very obvious for you when you had product market fit? And when more often than not with your angel investments, is it obvious?
Yeah. I think, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. To me, product market fit is really about when demand kind of outweighs your capacity to satisfy it. When you kind of can't, hire people fast enough, spin up servers fast enough, whatever it is, to sort of scale, because demand outstrips it, then I think you sort of hit product market fit. I think, kind of like first to market, it's a little bit of a poorly defined term. For Snyk, there were at least sort of two elements to it. There was kind of the product user fit of getting to developers. And so I think we hit that one pretty quickly. And there was a lot of learning still about sort of getting that done, but I think we got that. But it was very different between that and the product buyer fit, which is probably a bit more akin to product marketing if you talk about the business.
For me, with you, it's like, you've got the product user fit and then you've got the business model fit. It's almost like the same problem as Twitter in some ways, I find, which is like Twitter's a great product, like Snyk in the early days was, but you now need to layer on a business model that works.
Yep. And so that's why I think in use cases, I think in value propositions. And so who is it that you provide value to? And, can that person, and that's the first question. If you don't provide value, then, it's no good. And are there enough of those? And then eventually would they pay?
Do you think there's different degrees of quality when you look at the different 7 powers? So brand power is one. And when I look at that, I'm like, I love it. And I'm as much a brand person as anyone, but I believe it's inherently more transient and momentum driven than some of the other powers that we can discuss. Do you believe there's different variants of quality of power?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think actually I've had a couple of conversations with Hamilton. And so we discussed this, he kind of ends up dissing his own brand and process power. So it says both of those are just so easy to claim that they end up being a little bit loose in your definition.
Do you agree with that? I look at brands like Chanel, like Louis Vuitton.
Oh, brand power is very powerful. It's sort of for a tech startup or for a company that is building out. It's just so easy to claim that you have brand. But I think the idea of brand is really to be able to sell the same product for a significantly higher price because of people sort of taking pride for it. And so for instance, you think about Snyk, so Snyk has a certain amount of brand power. There's a certain amount of fairy dust, sort of DevOps fairy dust that all the security companies want. There's a certain amount of that people believe. But it's not a sustainable, sort of superior, significant capability. I think that's really the sort of the risk with powers, is that people try to call everything a power. And that loses the sort of the whole kind of idea of defining and understanding your powers, is that, where to invest.
Let's analyze Snyk. Which of the 7 powers, if you could choose 2, are you I hang my hat, we have these the strongest?
So, at Snyk, we went pretty deep on it. And so we do have We've done sort of power exercises for different competitor groups, like our powers as compared to the dev tools that try to go into security versus our powers compared to the security players are a little bit different because, the sort of the capabilities, what's normal in the ecosystem is different. I'd sort of say that Snyk's two primary powers are, one was counterpositioning, which sort of still holds in the security space. This notion of coming in developer first is to an extent at the expense of some CISO power, of some sort of top-down decision power, in which a lot of these security companies have sort of been designed to satisfy. And so that whole approach is very different. And then the second is and I will claim process power here, despite the sort of the criticality, and that is developer product-led growth, sort of the PLG in the security industry. And that was actually my argument with sort of Hamilton, which was to say, I think that if you go into an industry that is traditionally top-down, it is coming in with a product-led approach is counterposition at the beginning. But over time, you build process power by the sense that, let's say, a bunch of people, resigned from Snyk and went to an existing sort of company, even a new company, but definitely sort of an existing one, and they try to replicate the product-led growth motion within that company. It'll be very hard for them to do it. It is kind of mirrored into the culture and the product and the go-to-market, and it's so intertwined in how we operate that it's very hard to replicate. But it is a power against the security incumbents. It is not a power against, the sort of the ones coming from the dev tooling side.
How does your understanding, if you isolate those now and you sit in the room with your team, you're like, great, we know those two powers are really well restrained. How does that change how you operate and lead? Does it change how you operate and lead?
First, it might be interesting to sort of think a little bit about the exercise that we've done. So what we've done was, we took 4 primary competitor categories, and for each of those, we try to write down the primary capabilities that we differentiate on in those areas. And then we thought about the capabilities we could build, that we think that are sort of interesting to us. And then for each one of those, we sort of assessed, are they truly superior, significant, sustainable. And that was a good exercise, even if we've done nothing else. And sometimes, actually, we've done this a few times. Sometimes we've done nothing but the conversation, but it still distills your understanding of it. And I think that's very important. It helps. It's a mechanism. This and questions like, would this be more important in 5 years or not, are things that I do with the product organizations and definitely with the labs organizations, which is very kind of skilled in this now, to help us anchor in the future, to help us think about where it is going and where it is headed. And so that is very valuable. By the way, the hardest part is then distilling that into the top items. What is the one or the 2 items that you would pick for every sort of box?
What do you think is the biggest mistake that founders make when they consider 7 powers?
Well, most of them just don't consider 7 powers, right? They think about things a bit more loosely. But I think people are unwilling to pick. They think this is important and this is important and this is important. And so they end up underinvesting in the things that matter most. And so especially in the context of success, and we've done this at Snyk a bunch of times as well. I'm not sort of claiming in a sense here. At some point you sort of feel like the world is your oyster. You can do a lot of different things and you go into them. So at the beginning, it's about product market fit. It's not about powers. So if you actually over-rotate on powers, that would be the mistake. Over time, as you get something that is successful, I think powers are important because they help you pick the next thing to do. They help you ask, okay, if you're going to expand into X, right, add another product or expand an audience, which of your powers, the best question to ask is, which of your powers help you in that expansion? If the answer is none, then you really should pause and reconsider, because basically you're saying, I'm going to go into those areas and I'm going to compete on operational excellence merits alone. And so if you don't even know what your powers are, pause and go off and have a conversation about it. And it doesn't really matter if you use the powers kind of framework. It doesn't, that's just a helper. It's about understanding what are your core sort of sustainable differentiators.